Good morning. It's been several weeks since I took time to chat with everybody via video. I think it was actually the day before Emmett was born. So I've been back on campus for the past week and a half, trying to get caught up in this particular course and all of my classes and so forth. Hopefully, I will by the end of this week or next week, be caught up and start looking ahead and trying to work ahead for students who may want to work ahead a tad bit around spring break. That's my goal, at least. I do hope everybody is settling into to January, spring semester. It's the weather seems to have broke by now, so hopefully we can have a constant stream of opportunities for class without having to deal with the snow and that type of thing. Again, just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about some of the activities we've completed thus far in class and some of the activities that we'll be working on for this lesson and the next two lessons, actually. First, let's talk about some of the topics in prior lessons and try to answer that, again, that age-old question: what is prevention? I hope that the reading material, the links online, my handouts have kind of clarified what prevention is and is not in our communities. Again, when we're talking about prevention, it's basically trying to prevent something from happening. That could be trying to prevent high rates of cancer by encouraging folks to stop smoking. It can be to reduce the occurrences of drunk driving, as you've read some of my projects, related projects, and talking about the ideas of controlling your drinking, standard drinks, and things like that. It can be about preventing students from having trouble in the classroom. For example, many institutions have what's called academic alert systems, where instructors submit to counseling agencies on campus by the 8th week of class if students are having trouble in particular classes, if they're making D's or F's, in an attempt to intervene and help students be more successful before we get to the end of the semester where the actual grade of the F is awarded. So basically, trying to intervene on any topic in the community or on an individual level that may have a negative consequence and taking steps to kind of cut that negative consequence off if it's in the interest of the person involved. Usually prevention occurs on two different levels: on an individual level or a environmental level. Most of the material we will be talking about in this particular class is on the environmental level, meaning on the community level, when we try to prevent certain things in the community from happening with large populations of people, such as those stop smoking campaign commercials we might see on TV, or you might remember those egg commercials from many years ago that said this is your brain, and the egg is then put into the frying pan, and then the announcer says this is your brain on drugs, and so forth. That particular message is speaking to you individually, but it's also speaking to hundreds of thousands of other people at the same time. So basically, environmental prevention, or any environmental approach, is trying to address the problem with many people, many groups at the same time, as opposed to individual prevention activities. Again, individual prevention activities is actually discussed in detail in our prevention and education course that we'll be teaching here soon. But when we're talking about individual prevention, it's, for example, a good example of that in this state is called ADETS. It's called Alcohol Drug Education Traffic Safety School, basically. It's all traffic school, Many of you may be familiar with it from other family members or clients. And it's where you may enter into a classroom setting for a period of 10 hours to 30 hours, and you, along with 10 other people, are going through traffic safety school on an individual level. So the attempt is not to reach hundreds or thousands of people with a low level of information. Individual prevention efforts, the attempt is to reach one person or several people with a high level of information, high contact information. So it's kind of like this concept of a mile wide or a mile deep. Environmental prevention, what we're trying to study in this class, is talking about material that's a mile wide, meaning we're going to give little bits and pieces of material to lots of people at the same time, in hopes that we pique their interest and in hopes that we can make a big difference on a community level. For individual prevention, what is the topic of another class, is about a mile deep. With individual prevention efforts, the goal is not to reach as many people as possible. The goal is sometimes to reach as few people as possible, but to provide them the maximum amount of information possible. Another key component of prevention that has honestly been the challenge of all prevention efforts historically, and still is the challenge of prevention efforts, and will always probably be debatable, is how do you tell if prevention works? How can you prove it? The field of prevention has spent the past 10 years trying to establish itself as a evidence-based practice, as a practice that's based on research that's can be replicated, that is high-value research, and try to get away from the concept of if it feels good, therefore it must be effective. And honestly, sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it isn't at the same time. One of the great criticisms of this field, again, especially with funding sources on the state level, the federal level, and so forth, is many professionals have been out there calling their work prevention. Then during meetings or funding sessions or General Assembly discussions, those same professionals have been asked, well, how do you prove what you do works? Show me the data. Show me the facts. And this field has been really hard-pressed to be able to show the facts out there. That doesn't mean prevention doesn't work. It just doesn't mean that, it just means sometimes we haven't found really good ways to track and to prove that we know our activities are effective. So one of the goals of prevention is to know why we do what we do and what types of interventions and activities might be most effective for certain populations of the community. And that's really what we have to be concerned with as professionals and as students, and how we among the best models to try to justify our actions, our activities, and to make sure that we have a good foundation for the community change that we want to implement, is the SPIF model, the Strategic Prevention Framework model that we introduced in the prior lessons. So, this SPIF model, what is SPIF? SPIF is the Strategic Prevention Framework. It's actually a community change model that is not specific to prevention, but what did occur around 10 years ago was the federal government adopted this model and normed it, made some changes specifically for the prevention community. In response to the concerns of many state leaders and Congress that the prevention field didn't have a science-based approach to addressing problems in the community, or even proving that they were addressing the right problems, and a inability to track outcomes that many communities had. So this SPIF model includes a lot of steps in between the process. It includes assessment, terms such as capacity, planning, implementation, evaluation, sustainability, being culturally appropriate, and so forth. And that's what I really want to share with you today in terms of some of the details behind that. Really quickly. The first step is the assessment process. This is basically looking at your community, looking at the demographics of the community, looking at the problems that may or may not exist, and basically asking the question, what is the most important topic for this community that they want to address, that they see most pressing? And what topic will they get most involved in this community change model? It's really important to choose a topic that the community is interested in and the community is willing to participate in, that they think is important. Not that some topic or problem that an outsider 600 miles away thinks is important to them. So the assessment process is basically taking a look at the community, doing some research, identifying a problem, then proving with data and other research-based facts that this problem actually exists and that it's a problem that's big enough that should be addressed. The second step is capacity. Capacity talks about the current ability of the community to take to address the problem that was identified during the assessment process. So the bottom line is this. So we've identified our problem. The capacity building phase is, since we know what the problem is the community ready to take action on this problem? And if they're not ready, what will make them ready? So do they have the capacity to take action? If they don't have the capacity to take action, then sometimes you spend a significant amount of time building that capacity, encouraging folks to be comfortable to have a conversation, encouraging folks to take responsibility, giving them the skills they need to take action. This assessment and capacity building phase can take a long time. In some of the discussion boards, folks were asking how long this assessment takes. A good assessment process takes 8 to 12 months, to be honest. And the assessment phase is really expensive. For example, with Surrey County, with Connect the Dots, the Surrey County SPIF-SIG effort that encouraged you to review one of my grants, we spent about $70,000 during a period of 10 months just identifying and assessing the problem of drink driving in the community. And when we talk about that amount of money, $70,000 and 8 to 10 months, many folks have a hard time understanding and accepting that what you want to spend that much money on just talking about the issue and documenting that it actually exists. And sometimes, yes, I've went through this process for as little as $25,000, and it took 3 months. Sometimes you don't have the resources to conduct assessments to that level of depth, and you do the best you can with existing data, with existing information, with existing professional contacts, and try, again, do the best you can with documenting the community problem. The capacity building phase is usually less, could take anywhere from 2 or 3 months to 6 months to a year, and that's basically getting the community ready to address the problem that's been identified during the assessment phase. The planning phase, planning sometimes takes longer than the assessment phase. Planning processes for Connect the Dots in Surrey County took 4 months and another $20,000 to $25,000. So, what happens during the planning phase? We look at the needs identified during the assessment. We look at the capacity of the community to address the problem today. Then we make a formal plan with formal objectives, obligations, activities, um, and basically we plan out everything that's going to happen during the actual implementation of the program. All details are planned out, objectives are identified, and we know in advance how to gauge how successful we were with our activities. So the first part's assessment, figuring out what the problem is. The second part's capacity. The third part is planning your activities. Planning is pretty important and really difficult for human services professionals. Even for those folks, especially for those people who's been in the field for a long time. Again, in prevention and treatment services, there's been this habit to just provide a service, to provide any service. That any service is better than no service at all. And we're trying to get away from that model. Providing any service at all sometimes is not better. Sometimes it actually is worse, and it makes the problem worse than when we first walked into the problem. So the goals for this assessment and capacity and planning is to make sure we identify the right problem, we identify the right people to intervene, and we identify the right activities that have the greatest chance of being successful. And that's the implementation phase. Implementation hopefully takes place over a series of years, or dozens of years, actually. One of the challenges of prevention, though, especially with the SPIF model, is most SPIF grants from the federal government are funded for 4 years, sometimes 5 years. And you spend the first 18 months to 2 years in the assessment, capacity building, and planning phase. Then you only have about 2 more years, or maybe 2.5 years, to actually implement your program, to test it out. And usually 2 years, 2.5 years, is not long enough to see any community change. True community change begins to occur way on down the road, in years 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're very limited in the prevention field with having enough resources to carry out the interventions as long as they need to be carried out. For example, Connect the Dots, we did planning in 2007-8, started implementation in 2009, and this June the grant ends. Well, we've barely scratched the surface. We've only been able to address the needs of one city inside of the county of 66,000 people, and there are actually 2 other towns and 1 other city that we need to address. But because we only had around $150,000 per year to spend, our interventions and activities had to be extremely targeted towards a specific location, a specific geographic region, and a specific population that was identified in the needs assessment. So implementation, again, is actually going out there, putting your feet on the pavement, and doing the work and activities you said you would do during the assessment and planning and capacity building phases. The last phase is evaluation. It's taking a look back and and seeing how successful we were. So, for example, since last November, I've been working on the evaluation phases for Connect the Dots, which means we're looking at all the information, all the data we collected since 2007, and all the activities we have been involved with, and seeing how successful we were at implementing those activities, and how successful we were in terms of reaching out to the folks we were supposed to reach out to. Plus, we're looking at actual data sets in the community. If our goal was to reduce alcohol-involved crashes, then we will compare the numbers of alcohol-involved crashes that existed since about 2002 through 2010. Um, this is a really good point. Just because we don't see a decrease in alcohol-involved crashes does not mean the prevention activity was not successful. I haven't pulled the crash data yet for Surrey or Stokes counties, but I don't think we will see a reduction of alcohol-involved crashes. Even if we did, we could not prove that it was due to connect the dots, our prevention activities, because there's so many other community variables that is outside of our control that we can't take credit for. But there are some things that we know we did extremely well, like build the capacity for the community to have a discussion about alcohol-involved crashes, and to learn how to implement environmental prevention strategies. We know we did those things extremely well, and we can prove it. So sometimes, no matter what approach we take, proving that a specific program is effective is really hard. And sometimes we have to prove that maybe the main goal was or was not effective, but some secondary goals were effective. I'll give you an example. In Stokes County, in one year several years ago, 6 people died in one automobile crash that was alcohol involved. 6 people. That was an outlier. That was a one-time opportunity that did not happen the 4 years prior, or since then. That has not happened. So that 1 year artificially inflated the number of deaths for that county that was related to drunk driving. So sometimes we come across data sets that were just outliers that says on the surface, well, your program was effective or your program was not effective. And if you take time to think about it, that data doesn't say anything. It was just a one-time occurrence, and we can't prove a pattern. So the last pieces of this SPIF model is about sustainability and about being culturally appropriate, and that's really something that you're thinking about all the time. Sustainability means it's a question we're posing for Connect the Dots. Is we've spent again around $700,000 the past 4 years in Surrey on this topic. The money runs out June 30th. What happens then? How do we not lose our momentum and our brand recognition? The brand, Connect the Dots, is pretty well known in the county now. How do we make sure that this doesn't disappear into one of those programs that was here for 4 years, then disappeared after that? So the question is, how do we sustain this with limited funding? How do we sustain the momentum? How do we sustain the interest of the community in this topic, especially when there's no money? How do we keep working on this project when there's no money to fund it? And the last piece is being culturally appropriate. That means for everything we do in the SPIF model, does it fit the community that you're addressing? Does it fit in terms of the gender, the approach based on gender, ethnic groupings, age, and basically, is this a good fit for the community? I will give you an example. In Stokes County several years ago, we identified that providing prevention activities in the workplace might be a good way to spend some money. And we identified this research-based prevention activity program that taught job skills and prevention skills and healthy living skills in the community or in the workplace and the community. So I called the program provider, which was in another state, far away, and who had never been to Stokes County and had only been to North Carolina one time. And they proceeded to tell me what types of problems Stokes County had without knowing anything about Stokes County, and that they were going to come in and tell the citizens and their employers involved in the training how to solve all the problems of Stokes County and how the prior approaches that we've taken has been incorrect. Well, having an outsider tell a small community that everything they've done in the past has been wrong, and I'm out of state and I know better than all of you, is not being very culturally appropriate. It's the opposite, actually. A funny story about this is um, uh, the providers I was talking with made the assumption that there were large hotels in Stokes County, bus service, taxi service, and an airport they could fly into directly. So their goal was to fly into the Stokes County Airport, which doesn't exist, take a shuttle bus to the hotel next to the airport, and have the training next to the airport. Well, again, if you have never been to Stokes County, it's an extremely rural county, and none of those things exist. That's a good example of being culturally incompetent. It's a bad term, but it's true. Not understanding the challenges, unique perspectives, paradigms of the target population you're supposed to be serving. So this SPIF model, assessment, capacity, planning, implementation, evaluation, sustainability, and being culturally competent, is the best model we have right now for trying to identify and track community change efforts. One topic I introduced 2 lessons ago, and in the most recent lesson, is your student project. What we will be doing is taking the SPIF model and trying to help you identify a pressing problem in your current community or past community. Now, we don't have the resources or the time or the attention or the energy to really go through the entire SPIF model. Your project will be to hit the high spots. I want to introduce you to the model step by step using something you're really interested in, and you can take it as far as you want to go or as deep as you want to go within some basic guidelines. So don't expect that I want everybody to have a 60-page document by the time the project is over. What we may have is a 3 or 4-page document, maybe 5-page document, and maybe a PowerPoint presentation or some other presentation method, and an optional class meeting. The optional class meeting will be for class presentations. If you want to come and present your idea, the problems you identified, some of the things you learned, we might do that. For maybe this might actually replace an assignment or serve as extra credit, or I don't know, something like that. We haven't thought that far ahead. So you may remember we started talking about a community problem you're interested in the discussion forums. Then last lesson I asked you to really think about the problem and try to identify some reasons you think this is a problem, and some of your thinking about what might be some good next steps, that type of thing. So that without even knowing it, you are already in the assessment phase of the SPIF model. We're looking at the problem, seeing if it really is a problem, if it's in a problem we want to address in the meantime, and so forth. So we're going to take it a step by step like this, and it should be a fun effort related to something that you are really interested in, because I think the best learning opportunities in school and in life is to be involved in something you're really interested in. I just wanted to, again, I know this video is getting long, but talk about this particular lesson, Lesson 4. Lesson 4 and Lesson 5 are actually based on the same topic, based on education and skills development, which means education and skills development for you, the prevention professional. So this topic is pretty big, so we will be splitting it up between 2 lessons. And the prevention field is so broad that getting a good grasp of the skills and knowledge base that's required of professionals in the field is really hard, to be honest. But I wanted to give you a good overview of some of that material in the next 2 lessons. We'll be looking at how adolescents, how brains develop in youth, at different stages of childhood, teenage years, and so forth. It's pretty important to come to know the thinking process behind some of the decisions that youth make in the prevention fields and even the intervention fields, treatment fields. This is important information. We will be looking at what's called developmentally appropriate assets for individuals and for community members groups. Basically, how do we make effective use of the assets and strengths that exist in the communities already? Where we'll be looking at appropriate approaches. If we have a particular problem in a community, we will be talking about examples of this might be a good example to use in a particular community if it's culturally appropriate and it meets the needs of the community. Be looking at this Institute of Care model off the bat in terms of this is the medical model of prevention. This based on the medical model of healthcare delivery. So as you learn more about prevention, you will realize that the leaders of prevention, the research in prevention, is trying to swing prevention into the medical model of delivering healthcare services, much more so than ever before. And that holds true for human services as well. We will be also be reading Chapter 4, which is the drugs chapter in the textbook. For many of you, this will be a review, especially if you've taken substance abuse overview or addictive behaviors or have other information about drugs and the different types of drugs. This chapter is not meant to be an intense review. It just hits the high spots of basic facts that we need to know about drugs, alcohol, usage patterns, and so forth. And again, if you have any questions in the meantime about any of our material, topics, that type of thing, please let me know. I see that our midterm exam is due March the 4th, so I will be publishing the exam review guide in a couple of weeks, and then give everybody at least 7 days to complete the exam. I have not created the total exam yet, but as information is developed for that particular assignment, I will let you know. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.